Welcome, Kelly. Welcome to High Point.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I've got a lot of things to talk to you about and topics to cover, including your education, what made you want to be an engineer, your career path, what it is to be a structural engineer, what led you to focusing on timber, or some challenging projects you work on or you worked on, your current activities and roles, especially with Timber Development UK and Steel Warriors. And up top, there's a few announcements to make, and outside of this, the podcast as well, and where you think the timber industry is going. But first of all, can I ask you to introduce yourself the way you would like to be introduced?
Sure. I'm Kelly Harris. I'm a director at Whitby Wood, and also on board of directors at Timber Development UK. I'm a chartered structural engineer, but now sort of work on lots of structural engineering projects, but also more broadly in sort of looking at low carbon solutions and whole life carbon, just trying to make a difference in the industry as a whole.
Great. Is it the first podcast you do, or have you done podcasts before?
I've done a couple of podcasts before.
Great. So yeah, where I saw on your profile that you went to Altrincham Grammar School,
Wow. Yeah,
which is not very far from where I live.
Oh, really?
And well done, because I know it's hard to get into this this school. But yeah, what made you want to be a structural engineer?
Well, school, that was a long time ago. Yeah, it was quite an academic school, and I did lots of maths and physics there, which was sort of where I excelled. But also, I had a big focus on art. I have sort of artists in my family, and yeah, also sort of enjoyed that side of things. To be honest with you, when I was at school, I had no idea what I was going to be, and because I sort of was good with numbers and things, I actually applied to university for accountancy and business finance type courses. But when it came to actually going to university, I got offers from a few, but I didn't get into the one that I wanted at Leeds. And they actually wrote to me through the clearing process and said, with math, physics, and art, perhaps structural and civil engineering would also be a good option for you. And I was like, oh, that sounds quite interesting, but hadn't really been talked about before. I don't know if that's because of just exposure to the construction industry in schools, or I don't know. But I hadn't been aware of it as a degree or a career before. So I decided, yeah, that sounds actually pretty interesting. So I went and did, and after my first year, I changed to architectural engineering. I remember my architecture tutor said I had to do a drawing a day for the whole of the summer holidays, and he would let me know after that if I could join the architectural engineering course. And luckily, he said I could. Yeah, that was my way into the.
It's interesting that you say you relate drawing with architecture. I have the perception, or had the perception as well, that if you're really good at drawing and if you want to draw buildings, then you can be an architect. I guess it's the start of the passion. But then it seems like architects do very different things and completely different things than drawing. And yeah, you may do some drawing for fun, but then that's probably 5% of what you're doing. And it's the same as acousticians. Most of us are musicians and wanted to get into acoustics, but we do very little music in acoustics.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, I think perhaps you don't get the luxury of sitting all day and drawing buildings. your drawing skills are absolutely invaluable as an architect or an engineer. And when you're sort of problem solving or trying to understand something or a geometry or an existing building, whatever it might be, to sit with a pencil and draw what you're thinking as you're thinking about it is an amazing tool. And also to do that with people you're collaborating with in the room. So, and be able to sit there and explain sort of how a building is working with a drawing to an architect who can also draw, and then they add to it with what they want to do. And then between you, you can work things out a lot more quickly, I think.
Yeah. I agree. And I like a good drawing. When I started at Tuli Crescendo, I had a drawing tablet that was connected to my my laptop, and I was so proud of showing it off in meetings. But then I ended up not using it anymore because there's less drawings that we do.
Yeah, I think post-COVID and remote working, we're doing less of that now. But there are other tools, I suppose.
Yeah. So yeah, you went to Leeds Uni, didn't you? And what was your first job then?
My first job, so leaving university, I sort of was finding my feet for a few months and eventually joined a company in Leeds. We're a multidisciplinary company, BWB Consulting. They had several offices in the sort of Midlands and North. Then I think they've expanded further since I was there. And yeah, I got exposure straight away to lots of different types of projects. I remember having about 4 projects, and one was a listed hotel that we were turning into apartments. One was a new build steel office building. One was a new build concrete student accommodation block, and another was a sort of portal frame industrial. So it's kind of the whole spectrum of structural engineering all at once, which was great experience to start with. I remember day one though, being asked to design some timber joists and realizing we'd never been taught how to design a timber joist at university. So I panicked and quietly tried to read a textbook on timber in the corner, pretending I knew what I was doing. And I ended up doing a 5-page calculation for something that I could probably do now in 2 lines. So that sort of started me off thinking about why timber and designing timber was taught more widely in universities. And as my career progressed, it sort of inspired a few sort of avenues that I went down to try and make that make a change in that, help a change.
When was this? When you?
Oh, let's not talk. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. No, I started work in 2000.
Yeah, because it's surprising, and it's the same for quite a few unis as well. It's crazy that you didn't know how to design timber joist systems, or you didn't have any concepts of it when.
Yeah, I mean, that was a long time ago.
Yeah, it was.
Nearly
But I mean,
20 years.
timber joist systems are not. They're quite old as well. You know, they didn't appear.
Yeah, well, that's very true. I mean, and these were like timber joists to strengthen old joists in an old hotel. So it was, yeah, they were old joists to start with. They had been designed a long time ago originally. So yeah, but it is changing. Quite a lot of courses do include
Yeah.
timber now.
And was Mastinber a thing at the time, or probably not?
No.
Not yet.
I think there were some glulam beams you could get glulam.
What was the
No one was
first?
really talking about CLT or anything.
What was the? I'd say commercial, but like residential, like large residential. What was the first residential project made with Mastinber elements? If you don't know, it's fine. I'm just wondering.
Yeah, I'm not sure off the top of my head, but I know that KLH were instrumental in starting CLT in Europe, in Austria, and they brought it, I think, to the UK. But yeah, I'm not sure of the exact project off the top of my head. But I know there's lots in the UK, and Walter Sutton were very involved in that at the start. But I think that was more around the 2008, 2010 time.
Well, if people know, they can write it in the comments.
Yeah, I might have got my dates way off there, so please don't shout at me.
It's okay. We don't have to know everything about everything, and it's okay. So then you didn't spend too much time, no, a great deal of time at PWB. And what was your company after? And I presume that's when, and where you discovered you did more CLT and mass timber projects.
Yeah, I did. So I wanted to move to London, a lifestyle boy. So I remember coming down here and spending 2 days having lots of interviews and being very young, naive, and overwhelmed. But
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, I got a few different offers, and decided to join Haintil Steel at the time, who were only 1 year old, and about 9 or 10 people. But I joined them as a kind of grad plus 1 year experience in, what was it, 2008, now 2007. It was about 3 months before, 2007 it was, 3 months before the whole crash recession. And so it was a big boom where I got lots of job offers, and then all of a sudden I moved down and the whole industry changed, and there were lots of companies making redundancies. And luckily, because HTF at the time were quite small and growing, and had some really good clients who weren't particularly affected by the situation. And also I was a young engineer and not I was able to keep my job there, and also but it changed very much the type of projects I was working on. So we were working a lot for churches, for high net worth individuals, and private schools, institutions that have and people who had money in the bank and were taking the advantage of sort of low construction costs rather than being affected by the market. And lots of those sorts of schools and churches have traditionally used a lot of timber, and that is kind of where my exposure to it came from. I was doing projects like that. And then sometimes I'm looking at sort of staircases and sculptures and pavilions, and small structures where you really have to think about things from first principles. And you had to think about things from first principles with timber anyway, because we weren't really taught about it at university. So you have to think about it from scratch. And a lot of timber, especially engineered timber, is a product. And so you're sort of working out how the product works, rather than just designing to a standard code or using standard software like we do with other materials. So it was a great way to learn how to be a structural engineer, because you were really sort of exposed from the start to like different ways of thinking and different ways of approaching design and collaboration.
How did you learn all those skills and principles for designing for timber? Did you learn them from your colleagues, or did you have to learn them yourselves?
I think we will. Yeah, I mean, there's principles of structural engineering that I was definitely learning from my colleagues, and but with the products and the and how to approach ways of working with timber, I think the whole industry was learning at the time, and so we were on that journey together, and we learned a lot from the installers, the subcontractors, the producers of specific products. They would come in and talk to us. They would help with early stage design, and you get more and more exposed to how it all works, and then you could start thinking differently about some of their normal approaches as well, and which is a sort of luxury of a consultant, not tied to a certain product.
Yeah, it makes me think of obviously I used to work for a large multidisciplinary consultancy, and when I left, I had the comment that I wouldn't learn anymore because there wouldn't be senior or more senior engineers to explain me things. But since starting at Crescendo, I've never learned so much. Not only
Yeah,
because you have to look for things on your own, but also, as you say, the network and the industry. There's a lot of people outside of your company you can ring, and especially subcontractors, also suppliers have got a lot of knowledge, and it's really interesting and good to have a healthy collaboration with them. They're very happy to be run by you because you recommend their products, but you can understand everything. Yeah, so I completely agree with you.
I do think. Sorry, just on that as well.
You know,
That was also encouraged by the culture of the company at the time, which was very much to like share and talk about what you're learning from these people amongst each other, and then also challenge that and see if we can do things differently. And that also led to sort of our own research at HTS into how you can combine some of those products to make an even more efficient system. And so that was like also really, really fantastic way to learn, is sort of taking what you can from the industry, but then also using that to create the most efficient result.
did you have a few R&D activities to understand better?
Yeah, so we did. I led a sort of piece of research with this university and a master's student there, where we were looking at using cross-laminated timber slabs and glulam beams compositely together, using screwed-only connections. And so we wanted to do that because there was a part of the Eurocode that enabled a calculation in it, but it assumed very standard screws. It added huge factors of safety, and you didn't get much benefit from it, when we knew really that they were working, like, especially with some of the long, fully threaded screws inserted at the right angle, you could get extremely good connection, and you could almost make them work as a single material, but albeit in layers, in a similar way to reinforced concrete work with steel and concrete. And so, we led a piece of research where we got some materials donated by Binderholt, and we did a series of tests at the university to see that what the ideal screw arrangement might be. And then Rotherblast also gave us screws, and yes, we then did a couple of full scale tests, which showed a massive improvement on the Eurocode assumed assumption. But we did find, as you do with all research, that we couldn't get an exact equation answer. There was more research to do, but
Which is often the
we
case.
did quite easily, like in terms of serviceability and non-strength and safety, but just vibration response. We proved that the composite section worked very, very closely to our analysis results for a completely composite beam. And so we were able, for a project, to use that testing to say that the vibration was better, which was quite interesting.
Yeah. And I want to ask you about the challenging projects, but then probably HTS or Whitby Wood. You've been at Whitby Wood for a few years?
4 years now.
So, sorry. I think it's because I think the first time I heard about your name was at HTS, but I feel like you were still at HTS when Crescendo was created, which was 4 years ago. But yeah, let's. What did you work on any challenging projects? The I'll develop after. But what were the most challenging projects you worked on? Maybe it's just discovering timber and designing for timber.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose we started off doing sort of schools and nice houses and things like that. But that quickly changed to using CLT on office buildings as the market started to change. And we had a few clients who were quite excited about that one, like the fact that it was sustainable and it was beautiful. And there's a whole biophilic aspect to it, a healthy workspace. So I worked on several projects where we were adding to existing buildings using engineered timber. And when I was at Painted Steel, including their own office, which was nice, really nice one. I suppose all of them are challenging because connecting a super precise material to a building that's been there for a really long time, wasn't built straight, and has moved over its lifetime, and then having that connection be acoustically tight, fireproof, look good, and structurally safe, is always a challenge. And so every single connection you end up really thinking about in depth to make sure you've got the tolerances allowed, but then you've got the fireproofing and acoustic isolation and everything all in there. So I'd say all of those projects were challenging, but you learn a lot. And then through doing that, really wanted to start encouraging other people to do that. And that's how I started to get involved with Timber Development UK, where we were sort of sharing knowledge from those projects so that other designers, architects and engineers would be aware of those challenges and not make similar mistakes or than we might have done to try and move things forward.
Did you attend the? Yes, you did. I remember seeing you the Timber Development UK conference a few months ago, and somebody mentioned, and I tried to remember with Larry the previous episode. There was a comment about a document that was showing that an architect, and I'm not throwing the stone at them necessarily, but if an architect wasn't experienced in timber, the cost of a project would be more likely to be raised by a certain percentage. Do you remember this document?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily just blame the architect.
No.
I think the design team generally. Yeah, that's totally true. And I see it time and time again. And I think post sort of Grenfell and nervousness about design and health and safety and contractor competency and material prices going up and contractors just being generally nervous about not working with people they don't already know. It's been very, very difficult to do this type of project. And that's been a bit of a frustration for me. There are ways in which you have to approach the project now to make sure the building control are satisfied, the fire brigade is satisfied, and the insurers are satisfied. All really doable, but you do need to have the right team, because it might mean that a fire engineer needs to do more work in stage 2, REBA stage 2, than they would have done otherwise. Or it might mean that we need a PCSA for a subcontractor earlier to explain the methodology to the insurers. Or it might mean that there needs to be sprinklers, and so the M&E engineer has to ensure that the system has been designed for those. Or it might mean that the architect, it needs to be deeper, and so the architects need to make sure the planning drawings have the right height on them for a deep timber structure. And all of those things that I just mentioned are all things on different projects that have caught us out too late in the design to then enable, in the last 2 years, to enable a timber construction. And so having a whole design team all talking the same language and being led in the right way and doing the right studies at the right time is critical to doing it. And so that really needs a client who really wants to do it. A lot of them want to do it and they want to look at it as an option, but they have to really want to do it to like put the money into, or not even the money, but just enforce the or have the right governance in place to enable it.
That's very interesting. And my question to you is so we've been introduced by a lot of social engineers on projects, especially timber projects, because they know that and architects as well, but mostly structural engineers, because they really know the whole design team needs to include acoustic consultants and fire consultants as well, and usually they're appointed later in a design, so stage 3. But then there's big surprises when we come and add more protection, fire protection and acoustic layers and weights on the building, and the estimated cost for everything is increased, massively increased. How do you convince the clients to have us involved earlier?
Great question. I mean, I think we just have to explain at the start, especially when we're adding to existing buildings, like the build up and the weight of the build up is crucial. Like we're trying to. It could mean that actually, CLT is not it's not the right answer in some instances, and so because you're trying to limit the strengthening and any additional foundations and all of those things on the existing building. So we need to have that input from the start. And also it's quite, I mean, especially with acoustics, I mean, it's regulated for some building uses, but for others it's not. And getting the right balance of that and understanding the balance of acoustic performance versus embodied carbon and making the right decisions is super important, I think. And also, especially when if you're talking about commercial spaces and you want to take the benefit of biophilia and the exposed soffits, and then if you have lots of acoustic paneling, and you find that very, very late, then they're like, oh, well, actually, why don't we just a metal deck or a concrete slab instead? And that's kind of that repeatedly happens too.
It's
so I think having you guys on board early is crucial. So all of that is laid out very clearly, and the client understands what they're asking for.
Now at Whitby Wood, do you I presume you still work on projects, and what's your proportion? Because you seem to be sending loads of messages and being involved with organizations as well to spread the word.
Yeah.
What's your day-to-day? Maybe not day-to-day.
I joined Whitby Wood 4 years ago now, in 2020, or the end of 2020. And when I came here, we wanted to plot all of the specified carbon that Whitby Wood had specified until that point. They started in 2016, so only 4 years old then, so it wasn't that hard a job. And we wanted to sort of figure out how we'd get to zero carbon without relying on offset, as we kept seeing was being reported. We're going to be net zero by 2030 with lots of offsets that weren't necessarily achievable by some other companies. And we quite quickly obviously realized that we're an SME, we're a consultancy. We can do the best we can in terms of our business and our business missions. We can do the best we can in terms of efficient design and bring alternatives and low carbon options. but we aren't the decision makers, and we couldn't influence change to the industry simply by working on projects and doing the best we can. So we had a mission to sort of go out and make impact within the industry. And so I've been very involved in that since, as well as projects. So I'm probably about 50-50 projects and outside. And that sort of includes, we're sponsoring a PhD with Belfast University, which is part of a resource efficiency consortium called UK Fires, led by Cambridge. And that is a big consortium of PhDs, so we're exposed to lots of research in this space. And we're trying to sort of understand that and communicate that and apply it to some of our approaches and ways of working. And then we're also very engaged in various networks, Built by Nature being one of them, who have recently over the last year, been funding a piece of research that we've led called Octopen, which is all about an open source resource for everyone. It will be launched next Thursday on the 28th via a webinar. And basically, it's just showing the opportunity of adding to existing buildings with timber, as I've already been talking about today, in terms of structural embodied carbon. It's sort of meeting targets in the 2040s today without relying on any technologies that don't exist yet. And so we just want to make that the kind of, there's a lot of barriers to it right now, and we want to break some of those barriers to make small percentage more of it happen, or as big a percentage as possible happen before we resort to materials that are not yet sort of aligned with zero emissions. So we've been very involved with them and that network and delivering a web as well. So there are sort of two big moves to influence the industry, as well as sort of being part of institution talk and timber development UK panels and committees.
About Octopen, I was looking at it more, but I'll definitely attend that webinar. Is it just Whitby Wood, or like different? How many organizations?
No, so we actually are the first sort of conversations about this were actually with myself and Harry at Mule Studio, who are a programming company who we work with a lot with fantastic scripting and creating programs. And he was like, I really want to build an office for us on top of your office. How do we do that? And I was like, we should do it in timber. And that led to I was already part of the Built by Nature network, and I think Harry ended up going swimming one day and bumping into Joe Giddings, who was the head of UK, and said, me and Kelly have been talking about this. And then I was talking to Joe, and we had these conversations, and we ended up on the roof of our building having a conversation about it. And we thought we could create a program like to easily, an open source program to easily put your building in. So that was our original idea. So we applied for some funding to do that. And they actually came back to that application and said, well, lots of people across Europe come to us with the same idea. Not necessarily the program, but all about adding to existing buildings with timber. And so they asked us to project manage a pan-European project. So they introduced us to all the people. And so we met on a big call with New Urban Network and Holland and the Institute of Advanced Architecture in Catalonia. And we had a bit of a brainstorming session about how, as well as a tool, we could make impact in this space. And we decided that rather than publish something, which a lot of the built by nature output will get to that point now, multiple websites as well. But we thought like a web platform would be good, where like a knowledge center for all things timber. And our Dutch partners were telling us that it's actually called optoppen, not necessarily timber, but anything activating a roof, generally referred to as optoppen in the Netherlands, and we just love the word, so we adopted it as our as our name. And so the web platform's going to have the tool, going to have a piece of research using the tool, looking at London, Rotterdam, and Barcelona, just to see if you put timber on top of every single building, which we're not saying is necessarily the right thing to do, but just as a thought experiment, how much more floor area could you add to each city? The Netherlands has been a very in-depth countrywide study on how optoppen can affect providing housing. We've got some very detailed deep dive case studies, and then we've got some more light touch case studies from all over Europe and North America. And then we have some research on policy as well around Europe that enables rooftop expansion or timber or embodied carbon. We couldn't find one yet that sort of combines those, but just sharing good policy in those areas could perhaps create policymakers' thought process in a policymaker that leads.
It's very, very interesting. I don't know if it's coincidence, but I'm working on projects. It's designing, and we don't even know whether it's going to go through, be priced correctly or not. But I'm working on a project where we're going to have an arena. An arena is proposed on top of a warehouse, existing warehouse.
Wow.
But there's big challenges, obviously, for acoustics. Yeah, I won't talk too much about it because, again, it's being costed and we're all holding our breath for it to go through.
Of course.
But yeah, if there's a performance space or a conference space already on top of an existing building, we'll definitely have a look at it.
Interesting. I've not seen a conference one, no, but maybe that doesn't mean it's not out there. We can have a call out on the website if anyone has.
And if it goes through, we'll definitely put it on.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. It makes me very envious. I did apply for different grants to do more acoustic research, but especially for timber, but it's very hard to get. Mainly, I feel like it needs to be specialists, grant providers, because it's very hard to communicate an acoustic design aspect to people who are not used to or not that knowledgeable in construction and acoustics. But maybe it's great that, and makes me very envious that you guys got that grant. What do you know? Are you able to share how much you received at all? The project received?
Yeah, I think that's public. I think we received the whole consortium and the platform. It was 200,000 euros.
So that covered for. Did you have to get somebody to build the website, or one of the members built it?
Program, the website, the people's time in collecting the case studies, in developing app, and the communications. So we also have Rising Tide, who are comms strategy. So comms consultant have done an amazing job in making it a movement. So yeah, all those things were included in that, and everyone involved is also, there's quite strict rules around how that priced. So it's all not including profit and only a third of your normal overhead charges. So you're just covering in terms of people's time.
Maybe we could organize another episode just purely on Uptopen, unless you've already covered quite a few things.
Yeah, however, to do as many as you like.
Great. How about the Timber Development UK? What's your involvement? You're board member, is that right?
Yes, yeah. So I started out with well, it was when it was TRADA, the Timber Research and Development Association, because when we were doing the composite research at HTS, and we had a lot of projects to share knowledge on. I started speaking at some of their events and then writing in their magazine to share that knowledge. And on the back of that, I was asked to join the advisory committee for TRADA. And then once I'd been on the advisory committee for a year or two, they asked me to join the board of directors. And I think meeting one, it was proposed that TRADA merged with the Timber Trade Federation and we became Timber Development UK. So it was, a big learning curve for me. I learned a lot about merging in that period. But also, I was still very involved in the advisory committee, very involved in the university engagement committee, which is what I was quite passionate about, to make sure universities were getting the material they needed to be able to teach timber design as easily as they teach steel and concrete design. That was, as I spoke about earlier, it was a big bugbear of mine when I first started. And now since it's become Timber Development UK, we've changed. So TRADA, there was quite a lot of paywalls. Universities had to pay things. We changed that in COVID because it wasn't very fair. But what a big part of Timber Development UK purpose has been to make sure that's free, they're free resources. Basically we now have a big study that was done sort of last year, was the whole timber industry's route to zero, part of the sustainability committee. So that was super interesting to sort of, I wasn't directly running the numbers, but sort of inputting and being involved and learning about that was really, really interesting. And also on the circular economy committee, so we're doing quite a few projects where we're trying to reuse CLT and other timber members at the moment as well. So that's an exciting area as well.
Yeah, I feel like we also need to have an episode on Timber Development UK. And but can you? What are the main activities of the organisation? Obviously, and I have to say, by the way, I do receive their newsletters, and because I knew you were linked to them, I decided to read a few of them to prepare myself. And the content that's created is really useful, and even for me, just for awareness and for projects or awareness of the industry is really, really useful.
Yeah. Well, since it merged with TTF, it's an organisation that spans specifier all the way to supplier, which is quite unique and quite I find extremely useful. So there's still kind of, because it's still in the early days of merging, there's still kind of two bands to it, but we're linking those much more. So the newsletters, there's a designer a designer update and a supplier update. I actually, as a designer, find the supplier one sometimes more interesting than the designer one, because it's super important to know what's out there, what's affecting them, that could affect the cost of your project and what you might specify. And also if there's new products coming to market, or if there's new facilities in the UK that, you can specify products from that have reduced transportation, and things like that. I find it extremely useful.
Sorry, I'll stop you there. I completely agree, and I can't agree more.
Right.
It's when until I created Atelier Crescendo, we were all told, and I said it with Larry as well, there's not enough connections with the suppliers and the manufacturers, and because we want to create. It starts from a good intention to be very impartial with what we advise. But then now, especially with timber, there's so many different solutions of achieving the same performance. And we need to be more aware of the solutions that exist so we can have different options for the design team and the client, and also know the cost. And knowing the cost of these options can only be done by close connections with the suppliers. And I feel like we as designers and engineers need to pretty much have a small QS responsibility in costing for our own solutions. Obviously, it's difficult, and you can't learn about everything, let alone just learning about acoustics. And acoustic solution is hard enough. But yeah, sorry, I've cut you, but
No, but
I
I think
can't agree
you're
more with this.
absolutely right. And it's interesting because there's been a lot that I've learned by being involved on the board about sort of outfalls of Brexit and how that affects imports and exports and certification routes and all of these extra costs for some of the suppliers, and how that starts to affect the market, and then it can inform how you specify things as a designer as well. I think when you've got to ask someone if it's possible. It's just interesting. Yeah, and I think that's a massive benefit of the organisation. Also, that means that it's quite linked to lobbying and government. So there's a new, well, not new anymore actually, but there's a DEFRA set up, a timber and construction roadmap and and there's a series of working groups that are working on that, and they're all organised by a team of timber organised associations, TDUK being one, and the Structural Timber Association. And that's super interesting as well, to try and consolidate information for government to try and inform policy and get more homegrown timber into construction, which is really, really important, I think. And then also they celebrate what we do. So there's the Wood Awards each year, which are kind of the designer awards, and there's the TDUK Awards, which are more supplier and business and product awards. So, and I think it's really important to share project knowledge and celebrate the good things people are doing.
When do you think we'll be able? Well, you talked about lobbying the government. I've got a few questions about this. But well, first of all, have you been engaging with the new government at all? And do you know if there's any positive results from it for the timber industry?
Well, they haven't yet, but we're carrying on with the timber and construction working group, but I don't think they have formally approved or said they're going to listen to it yet. But I'm hoping that they will. Probably because they're busy. There was, I think, earlier this week, a group formed around looking at the house building target, but trying to connect it with carbon emissions and nature-based solutions. And I believe that they met earlier this week. I'm not sure what date. We're on the 22nd of November, 2024 right now. But I'm hoping that has some positive outcomes. On the 5th of December, I've been invited to talk at a policy forestry conference at the Queen Elizabeth Centre, which will is led by Confor, This is kind of Europe-wide, trying to get timber policy out there. So I'm talking there about using timber in construction as well. So I'm hoping it seems to be more of an audience now than there was with the past government, and there's actually groups working on it. What they're going to do, I don't know yet.
So when do you think we'll be able to build really, really tall buildings with timber?
Tall?
Yeah.
Do we need really tall buildings out of timber? Don't know. I mean, I designed a few hybrid ones. For me, I think.
What's your opinion then?
Sorry?
What's your opinion on building tall timbers? Tall building timbers.
I think for me, if I go back to my structural engineering route, I just want to use the right material in the most efficient location in the right way. And for me, it's not necessarily building a tower purely out of timber. I think using timber in a floor slab or floor slab system in the right location in tall building is absolutely the right thing to do if that's going to be the lowest embodied carbon solution for that floor. You look at embodied carbon, whole life carbon breakdowns, the majority of it is in the foundations and the floors. So you can save a large percentage of the embodied carbon by using timber in the floors. Whether that gives you your fire safety requirements is another question, and that has to be considered. It probably needs to be a composite with a non-combustible material as well. But also sort of using hardwood LVL as vertical elements. Sometimes that can be stronger than reinforced concrete. So you can do that as well. And they can be completely encapsulated if needed. So I think there's lots of single elements that can be used in tall buildings, but I don't necessarily think that just building the tallest wholly timber building is necessarily needed. I think sometimes they act as beacons to start a conversation, which is useful. But I'm not sure. I think we'd make a much bigger impact building all the domestic houses we need out of timber, and low-rise buildings with less fire safety concerns. If we could build as many of those out of the timber supply we have possible, then we're solving a big.
Interesting. So based on this, I guess we would need to educate more the developers who are building so many houses with masonry materials done.
Or house builders.
House builders, yeah. Which is quite a big challenge.
It is, but well, in Scotland, 80% of new build housing is timber frame. So already in the UK, we have, a good market for it. We just need to expand that, I think.
Yeah, I was talking to, quite a few years now, to a developer who are building those large estates of houses, and asking if they were thinking of changing their construction methods, and they were saying, it's all set, we know what we're doing, and if we were changing the materials or the structure of the houses, we would have to rethink everything.
They would.
But saying this, in one next episode, we'll have it's Sarah, who has a really interesting project. I'm sure you've heard about her. They're doing a co-op project with houses made of timber, but
that sounds
using
great.
an alternative method of, and passive houses as well. So can't wait
super important
to have her.
I think as well on that though, it depends on which part of the country you're in, whether it's the right material as well. That other low carbon material options out there, it doesn't have to be timber. It may be that it's a composite again, but with another bio-based product. So we've been looking at timber frame with straw bale, timber frame with hemp, all sorts of different approaches. And sometimes load-bearing stone. It depends on the location, what resources you're close to, what processes they have to go through to get to the location.
So one question actually I have is, homegrown timber can only be C16 strength, is that correct?
UK timber, you mean? An island. I think it's just, from what I understand, and I'm not a forestry expert, but from what I understand, it's the temperature and soil conditions that we have here, and it's the way the trees grow. I mean, they don't meet the same strength capabilities as similar trees in Scandinavia and Central Europe.
Yeah.
And I think, to be honest with you, if you're making, like most of the housing projects that we've been looking at recently, we don't necessarily need C24. We just design it for the C16 requirement. There was nervousness in the industry about C16 because I believe there was some supply issues in the past in terms of quality. And so people would just say, oh, we're only using C24 because we know it's going to be okay. But that meant it has to be imported. And so there's a bit of a perception piece to get around there. But as far as structural engineers are concerned, we can design for C16, we can design for C24. Normally, particularly in floors, strength isn't governing in terms of the sizing. It's normally the fire case or the deflection case. And so C16 isn't that much worse than C24 in those conditions. So it doesn't affect it too much.
So you can build houses with C16 timber. Can you build like flat or like taller buildings with C16? What are the limitations? What up to what height or level?
Yeah, I mean, it's just to the structural calculations, and then all that will change was it'll be the members get bigger because they need more area to support the same load. So there's no technical reason you can't use C16. They'll just have thicker walls or bigger posts. You can also use C16 in engineered timber products if you want. They're not at the moment because they're all made in Europe where they have C24 easily available. But if we get to a point where the UK is great, I think there's only a couple of small facilities making engineered timber here at the moment. But if that sort of grows, then we could quite easily make engineered timber from C16 and it make very little difference to the product.
I had another question, but I can't remember what this is. What's your opinion? That's it. I've seen a lot of products from Europe, like it's modular floor elements or modular wall elements.
Yeah.
What's your experience and opinion on them? And they seem to be doing really well. Some really nice performances. So I can see there's one in particular I'm thinking about, which is great for acoustics because it guarantees the whole floor construction just comes in and it's got the sound insulation and sound absorption performances that you need under the slab. And I thought it's great. It must cost quite a lot, so you need to optimize the use of it. But yeah, what's your opinion?
I think they're great. Absolutely. And I think on new build, brilliant. Very hard to add to existing buildings with them because they come in standard sizes and you normally have to make something quite close to an existing building. sometimes there might be a situation where it was like harmonious coming together of the two. But yeah, no, I think anything offsite, low wastage, everything all together there is brilliant. I suppose it's just where it's made and the transportation of it. Sometimes, I mean, in panels, it's probably absolutely fine. Sometimes when you find with volumetric solutions, it's a lot more transportation, especially with coming from far away. You have to think about that when thinking about carbon emissions. But yeah, just generally, I'm a massive fan of any panel system ready made, and really we just need to. It comes back to that design team awareness and governance point. We can very easily get down to a stage 3 design, and then something like this be proposed, and you've gone too far, and you have to redesign everything, and the client doesn't want to pay more fees. So you have to really dig into those systems early at the beginning of stage 2 to like make sure if you do want to use them, that the building you're proposing suits them.
So where do you think how do you compare the UK timber industry against the other countries? Do you think it's quite late, it's got a lot of improvement, or it's quite well in a good position?
Small. It's small. I mean, the majority of experts and timber suppliers in the UK are importing their timber. So it's really, yeah. I mean, they're very good, but I think there's still room to change and more UK timber be made now. Whether that's actually possible, we're always going to have to import some timber, because even with planting the amount of forests that were planned to be planted now, we're not going to get enough by 2050 that is mature enough and with an industry and good enough to supply everything. So we have to be thinking about other materials that we have that are low carbon, and we have to still consider imports and how we're going to do that.
Which actually leads to, what do you think Larry was saying that CLT was in a big hype before, and we realize it's very expensive. Sometimes it's not necessary, especially to build elements that are not load bearing, or there can be alternative methods. What do you think the future of sustainable materials are, and what the future load bearing materials would be?
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, resource efficiency, I keep coming back to that, right? And CLT is super high performing, very material intense product. And it's fantastic, but you really need to put it in the right place, I think. So, yeah, in large buildings, in long span floors, in tall, like not tall, but tall buildings that need the vertical wall. All those places are great for. It's fantastic for. But when you start looking at putting it in houses and unknown non-load bearing walls, it seems like it's not an efficient use of material. Well, it doesn't seem it isn't. It's not an efficient use of material. We were working on the Phoenix project down in Lewis, and that we had options at the start for that to be completely CLT. But we found that it was a series of terraces, maybe somewhere between 6 to 10 buildings long. And generally there were apartment buildings on the end and terrace housing or duplexes in between. And we saved a significant amount of embodied carbon by making the houses we kept the apartment blocks, the 2 bookends, as engineered timber CLT structures, because they were, the apartment couldn't really align very well, and they were performing quite, they needed to perform high structural performance. We kept them in CLT, but all the houses in between we changed to a timber stud with hemp infill. And timber posi joists for the floors. Spans weren't very long; they were somewhere between 5.5 and 6 meters, and we saved a huge amount of embodied carbon. But the engineered timber provided stability for everything else, and it was just the right place for the right material. And I think we need to be thinking much more in those terms when we're going about.
You talk about hemp. What do you think about hempcrete block? Are they good structurally as well?
Yeah.
They're not very
as long
dense
as
for
you're
acoustics.
designing them within the product declaration.
So they've got the same. I need to research into this. They've got the same capacity structurally as blockwork, or they're a little bit.
Oh no, it's
weaker?
less. We've been using like a hempcrete panel in combination with a timber frame, but not on its own, because we were looking at 4-story buildings where it wasn't really able, it needed the timber as well. But I think on more smaller sort of single 2-story construction.
Okay. The last question I've got for you is, I'm just going through all the questions and things, but where do you think the timber industry is going in the UK and outside of the UK? It seems like we're quickly gonna maybe not walk away from CLT, but use much more cleverly other materials as well. And I guess we need to know about them.
I mean, I don't think it's necessarily walking away from CLT. I think CLT will grow. I'm hoping that it's used in more buildings in the right way, in the right place, right time. And perhaps there's a lot of work going on with CLT. I mean, it's not, I said it earlier, it's expensive. Maybe per meter cubed, it's more expensive than some other materials in some markets, depending on where it's being transported from. But sometimes the cost savings in speed of construction, in not needing a ceiling, in being able to add more to an existing building without having to strengthen it, can mean that overall solution using CLT is cheaper, or at least equivalent. And so I don't think it's going to be used less. I think I'm hoping that people start to use timber more generally, and there's a place for all products, but we have to use the right ones in the right places.
Great. Other question I forgot to ask you is, what's your involvement with the Steel Warriors?
Steel Warriors. Oh, this is a great one. So when I was at Haynes Steel, we got a call out of the blue one day from a great guy called Ben Winter, and he out of nowhere had thought of this idea. He worked in PR to create a charity around to tackle knife crime, and he called Haynes Steel because he googled steel engineers, even though Steel is Tom Steele's surname and not necessarily what they do. But anyway, he provided all things weird and wonderful reception, sent him through to me, and we started talking. And he wanted to make calisthenic gyms, which gave young people who might be attracted into gangs or into knife crime culture a different outlet for their energy, and also a different way to feel safe and protected by using their own body rather than using a weapon. And so he wanted to create outdoor gyms, but do it from the confiscated knives by the Met Police. And so he's like, can we even do this? So got very involved in this. We designed sort of 3 different gym types. We worked with calisthenic experts. So we got the layout they really wanted and felt worked for the training sessions they wanted to do. And we worked with metallurgists and foundries and all sorts of recycled companies. We were on the phone to all of them up and down the country, figuring out a way that we could take knives and somehow make metal into a gym. So what we found was that we could melt it, we could burn off all the impurities, we could then send it to another facility and melt down the steel. It was a stainless steel, but it wasn't of a structural grade. So then we had to send it to be mixed with a high strength duplex stainless steel to get a rounded, structurally capable material. And then because we didn't know from each batch exactly what the strength was going to be, because there's lots of different knives that are going in. We tested every single element before it was then fabricated into the gym. So we found we couldn't cast, we had to cast it from a melted metal, and we could only cast square sections. So the bars that part of the gym that you have to hold to do the exercises, they couldn't be knife steel, but all of the vertical posts could. So the vertical posts were knife steel, the bars are normal steel, and we had to figure out good ways of connecting it and building it and all those things, which was a great process. There's now 4 in London. So Finsbury Park, Brockwell Park, Tower Hamlet, Langdon Park, and we just opened last week Carpenter's Estate in Stratford. Well, there's also one in Brixton Prison, and they're super successful. Christian, who runs all our social media and programs, is like amazing. He's doing all sorts, and you should follow them on Instagram because there's channels, there's classes, there's all sorts going on. There's youth development programs. We have some of our trainers and some of the trust. I'm now a trustee since I moved. Who would have become a trustee charity. Some of our other trustees are people who started using the gyms and then decided they wanted it to be their career, and now they're trainers and they work for the charity. It's super rewarding and be part.
Amazing. I'll
That's a
definitely
long
extract
story. Sorry.
that bit. No. It's good. Well, you're a very good storyteller, and there's a few bits of this podcast, including this one. I'll have to take and make it as short, so this one will be a different video. I'll look into it definitely. I didn't realize all this. So if they, I presume they don't sell things; they just install their systems in the parks.
Well, we've cast about 6 gyms and we have them in storage, and we give them to people who want them, and then they have to build them to our spec, and then we run the classes for free. That's how it works. We solely funded by donations and sponsorship. But now we have a partnership with Gymshark, who have a clothing range that they're selling that has Steel Warriors branding on.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Kelly. It was really interesting. I hope there'll be loads of people listening to this episode as well. How can we get in touch with you if people want to contact you?
Yeah, you can get in touch with me. Probably the easiest way is on LinkedIn. I'm normally doing something on there.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, Kelly, again.
Bye.